Hey, Bigpod.
Hey,
First of all, there's something that's obviously very captivating. But I have discovered that I now have software controls over this light here behind me. As you hear me clicking on the audio feed, you see a light flashing. And it's super nice. I have also discovered that it is an RGB light bulb. And if I can do this, it changes the color. I have an addiction to buying all these cheap little smart LEDs and countering them over home system. Now every single light bulb in this room.
with that security issue, cue the music.
Yep. Hey guys, welcome to No Talks Allowed. I am your host Josh, and today I'm wearing this wonderful white T-shirt. And of course, I have brought with me today a Mr. Bigpod, who I can't really see right now because heaven forbid I've decided to put a window in front of his face, so I don't know what color T-shirt he's wearing today.
It's gray
Oh, okay, so we're both being...
and a little bit white.
Okay, so it's probably got some fancy graphic on it. All right, so if
Exactly.
you're watching this on YouTube, you should describe Bigpod's shirt to me because I can't see him. But Bigpod, we have some heavy topics today, like super heavy.
Really?
Yes. Like, okay. So, first of all, I know we have gotten a little bit political with some of the topics on the show lately. And this is just going to be one more because it kind of can't be avoided. But as we record this, our wonderful president here in the United States called Donald Trump, I don't know if you know who he is, has said something.
I do.
Yeah, he has said he could just pull the plug on the internet for Europe, and Europe can't do anything about it.
I don't know.
Well,
While there are ways he could pull internet, it isn't really that much of an actual threat, because remember, there are many pathways to US from Europe and back.
yeah. So
But
primarily, how the U.S. communicates with Europe is through the transatlantic fiber optic cables. There's a number of them. I believe like the main cable. There's like 4 main cables and like a bunch of secondary cables, but those can be physically broken. But we have backup solutions if they do get broken. It's this thing called satellites. They're up in the sky. And
there's also that thing called Asia that is also helping
that's
us,
true.
because we can just route traffic through Asia to America.
That's true. Now, the reason why this is possible is because the internet works off of this protocol called TCP/IP, which means that
Yes.
there's an IP address that exists, and as a result, if that global IP address exists, it means that you should be able to reach it from anywhere in the world because that address is specific to a location. So if I just type in like an IP address on my web browser, my web browser will communicate first through like my local gateway here on my local network, and it's going to broadcast that IP address out to everywhere. Just wait for somebody to respond and go like, "Hey, that's me." That's basically how TCP/IP works on like a very small scale, but it works just like that on the larger scale too. Unless, Trump is talking about like DNS blocking, but there's been ways to get around that for years.
Yes, and even at that point, like, disabling any kind of connection to America from Europe is hard, really hard. What he's probably talking about is basically trying to stop cloud providers to have European data centers, which is one of the things that Europe kind of requires. Many companies and many governments require things like data residency, and he can force Microsoft, Amazon, Google to be hostile to Europe.
he could, but then he has to deal with the fact that Microsoft, Google, and even Amazon have very, very much proven that they want to be in the EU market. So,
Yes.
if
Why wouldn't they then?
Right?
If they didn't want to be in EU market, they would have gone long ago.
as much as they've been fined, they are still willing to operate in that market, which means that they're making some money there. Because I don't see any other reason why they would want to be there. But so if Trump comes and says that, hey, Amazon, I need you to sell off all your data centers and distribution centers over there in Europe, Amazon go like, yeah, that's fine. We'll just spin off a separate company and we'll just like shadow own it. Or something like that.
Yeah.
Like maybe they'll just give us kickbacks every now and then through like these backwater channels through Asia or something, you know. Same thing with Microsoft and Google. In fact, I believe Microsoft has actually done that for the Chinese market.
Probably.
Yeah, and even then you have to deal with like a lot of Europeans are looking to move away from like these U.S. cloud services to begin with. So this is just giving them more fuel for that fire. Like we've got like entire like governments in Germany that I know that are switching off of Microsoft Windows, installing Linux. I believe that there's several others, not like on the national scale, but like on the local level that are switching off of Microsoft Windows. Simply because it's a U.S. company, and there's been some things going on from the U.S. for the past 10 or 12 years at this point.
Previously, we reported on German state of, I want to say Schleswig-Holstein, but don't hold me on that. I would have to look at our backlog, which I right now really don't want to do because I'm recording a podcast.
I don't want to do that either because, that's mid-show research and we've already done enough of that.
We do that already so much. Let's try not to listen to another podcast while we do it.
Yeah, that can take a minute. But it's just like more things. It's just like I don't understand I can understand where he's getting these ideas because he's a pretty old guy and he has a very basic idea as to how things work. But like he's got advisors that are supposed to inform him about this rather than just say yes, I would assume.
Yeah.
Yeah, but even then, it's just like Trump has actively said that the EU exists apparently just to like ruin like the American companies. So maybe he's just upset about it. But Germany has came out and said that Germany's got like backup plans for like if something like this were to ever happen.
Yeah, and even the boss of a French cloud company, OVH, basically said that it is a risk, but that is a risk. He essentially said that it is a risk, and it's a new paradigm where a cloud is essentially a tap of water.
Yeah.
What if it's closed?
Yeah, so
I just basically I was reading while I was writing. That's why I did. That's why I messed that up very badly. Welcome to No Tax Allowed podcast.
Yep. Welcome to the show where sometimes we have to do mid-show research.
Actually, I'm gonna correct us a bit right away. It appears Donald Trump didn't directly state that he can do it, but it is fear a lot of Europeans have.
Oh, okay. Well,
yeah.
Anyways, Bigpod. Speaking of American companies, guess who potentially just got fined?
Who? Who?
Yeah. It's not one of the three that we mentioned. This is actually Meta, or Facebook, as you might know them. And
Yep.
they did a thing called this tracking that everybody suspects that they were doing because they told you that they were going to do it. So this time around, they did it a little bit too deeply. So they devised this system called local house tracking, and what this did was it bypassed Android's sandbox protections to identify, and this would even circumvent incognito mode, VPNs, and refused or deleted cookies. Right? So, Bigpod, I know you did a little bit more research into this than me, but first of all, how does this work, and how is Android's sandboxing supposed to prevent this?
It's technically not because ports are supposed to be able to be opened. But let's go back to the beginning. So what Meta did was, after you logged into one of their apps, Facebook or Instagram, they opened certain ports on your device, essentially punching a hole through the sandbox, which is allowed because you should be able to open ports. But problem is that as soon as you have network permission, which basically any app that needs to access internet has, you can open ports. That is maybe a bit of a security hole, or maybe too broad of a permission set for something like this. But I don't know, they need to choose what kind of permissions go in what group, so it probably makes sense. But what happened when they had those ports opened, if you in a browser went to any page that also contained what is known as a metapixel, essentially a piece of code that has some data from Meta about it, so they can track you wherever you go, basically, so they know that you visited this website, and so on and so on. This metapixel is given to everyone who advertises with Meta, so they can track things like how many people got on their website, who got on their website, and so on and so on. But in this case, when metapixel finds out that it is being done on Android, what it does is, instead of going the normal route, it tries to open those ports, to open a connection onto those ports. And it can get a lot of information from it, including directly tying it to your account, and so on and so on and so on. Basically, because it's happening in your browser and locally on your device, they basically override any kind of protection you can think of.
Yeah, and here's the kicker. You don't have to be logged in an account for this to happen.
No, actually you do. Based on the research I read, it only activated for logged in accounts.
Well, yes, you have to log into an account initially, but if you log back out, it will still track you.
Yes, because of course it will.
Now, of course, according to Yandex, Meta services are roughly 22% of internet traffic.
Wow.
Lighted, you gotta think that's probably counting all those random blogs that just have a share on Facebook button, because there is some telemetry data that gets transferred back and forth with those websites too.
Yeah.
So that's probably where most of that number actually comes from. But so this is a lot of places where it's just you might accidentally trigger this thing. And it has been brought to the attention that there's some European regulations that might have something to say about this. The ever popular GDPR, which somebody in our audience was definitely expecting, as
General Data Protection Regulation, for those of you who like the long names.
Yeah, and then we also have the DMA, but this time the DSA is involved.
Oh, DMA and DSA.
Oh,
Ooh.
yes. Now
Digital Services Act and Digital Markets Act.
now we have talked about the DMA before when we were talking about the App Store thing, but now we got the DSA involved, which is services. And you ready? You ready for the potential fine that they might be facing, Bigpod?
Ooh.
So
Do tell.
So with these combined services, we have 4% plus 6% plus 10% of Meta's annual global revenue, equaling to about 20%, which, by the way, passed $164 billion in 2024, which means the EU might be able to fund Ukraine.
That's gonna be a cool 32 billion euros, not dollars. Let's be clear, it's euros that they're gonna get fined at the maximum theoretical limit. But it is important to know that it has never been actually that they applied multiple maximum fines simultaneously. But this is kind of outrageous, honestly.
I can honestly see a world where, Meta actually deserves this. So, because, it's pretty darn disgusting. So, I do have a Meta application installed on my phone because, I'm in America and my small government will only ever communicate via the Meta tracking. So, unfortunately, I kind of have to use it, but I'm sad because of it.
Yeah.
So,
one technical tidbit I discovered about it by reading an article, of course, is that apparently to communicate they're using a protocol called WebRTC.
Oh, that video streaming protocol that you and I use to talk to each other?
Yes.
Oh.
Somehow, instead of actually doing video call, they're literally using WebRTC traffic to go between the Metapixel and the native app, whether it be Instagram or Facebook.
Huh, that's interesting.
Using something called SDP modification, which, let's learn what that is. It essentially allows browser to insert data into the WebRTC initial handshake message. So basically, my guess is that they literally do just initial handshakes all the time when they try to get the data, which is just wow.
Yeah. So, Bigpod, let's move on from this here because it's time for us to have a discussion, right? So,
okay.
Obviously, our wonderful display server of X11 that I know that neither you and I really particularly use a lot of anymore, but it's still kicking around. But it basically has all but a literal end of life date. Being like 2032, because that's when Red Hat dropped supporting for it, because that's when they dropped support for RHEL 9. So we've kind of got to take a look here and figure out what is Wayland still missing. Well, obviously, it's mostly in my experience, Wayland just works perfectly fine. There's a couple.
Same in my
There's
experience.
a couple gotchas, like global shortcuts, but then again, it's also kind of makes sense as to why global shortcuts don't work. And then it's really the biggest blocker for Wayland at this point is DRM leasing, which doesn't exist or work with every single capacitor out there. But I know that works for KDE Plasma. So.
But that is the problem of Wayland. That's the problem with the specific compositors.
Right? That's an it.
Because remember, at the end of the day, Wayland, unlike X, is just set of protocol specifications.
Yeah.
It's not a server. It is set of protocol specifications. Things like Mutter, double roots based compositors, things like Kevin, need to follow to be compliant for Wayland, so they can do so apps that are written for Wayland work, and that's about it.
Yeah, to further define it, all Wayland is, even though you might have a Wayland package installed on your computer, it's essentially just a file of variables. It's just like, hey, this is just a list of all the things that's supposed to be here. That's it.
Yes.
And to an extent, that's kind of how the X11 protocol works too. The difference is that the X11 protocol came out before, this idea of a display server really existed. So they just made the server for you.
Yeah.
And of course, we're talking like back in the 80s that this stuff was done too.
Yeah.
So there were some security minded issues that we have with it today that didn't really exist back then, because heaven forbid, computer networks might not have existed. So
yeah, everything was done local, and only security problems were local problems, like one terminal hacking another terminal, and that's about it. And because they were inside corporations which supposedly had tight control over everything, that supposedly wasn't a problem.
yeah, so,
And security and IT security wasn't really a big thing yet. Anyway,
yeah.
the cybersecurity. Ooh.
Yeah, so obviously these issues could be fixed with X11, and in fact, back in 2008, the X Org Foundation and all their team members took a good look at X11 and go like, do we want to fix this? And they made out this whole list declaring like their wish list for X12. And then they listed out everything that they wanted X12 to do, because this is important for the conversation here. And they decided,
Yes.
nah, we're not going to do that. And then coming from like a side project was where Wayland actually initially originated, and he kind of just mentioned it. And then the entire Xorg Foundation came around and looked, and yeah, we'll just do this. We'll just do this instead. And that's been the story of Wayland ever since. Well, obviously...
And Wayland is literally everything they wish to have in X12. And
plus more.
let's remember, X12 would have to be written from scratch, because there is too much craft in X11. Like, at the end of the day, X11 was made to work with terminals. And I'm not talking about terminal emulator. I'm talking about terminal boxes.
Yeah, for context here, I'm going to say this from like a non-developer perspective, right? So I'm going to use cars as an example, right? Let's just say you're an auto mechanic, and you've been working on the new 2024 model, and you're just fixing all these wonderful electrical issues that our wonderful cars come out with, because heaven forbid they're all garbage. Well, you come around, you work on this car that was made back in the 1960s, 1970s. It doesn't have the electrical problems that the other cars have. Instead, it has mechanical problems. So now you have to figure out how a carburetor works. Which, that's a bit of black magic if you've never looked at it before. Now, obviously, it's not a particularly great comparison, but let's take it from a developer's perspective. X11 is written in C. It is C code. Yeah. So, if we look at it like what programmers are learning, they're not really learning C. I mean, if they do, it's maybe for like a single semester, and then after that, everything that they do in C is entirely voluntary. So, yeah, and it's a bit of a love-hate relationship, especially when you have to figure out how to get multi-threading work in C. Because, C is a legacy language. It existed before multi-threading existed, so it came in after the fact. So,
yeah.
And so you have to onboard people to that. Then you have to onboard people to the Xorg development process. So that's communicating through mailing lists. Still, mostly. Yes, they have a GitLab, but you're still communicating through mailing lists and emails. Which, that's another barrier to entry, believe it or not. Because, people are just used to, just go to GitHub, open pull request, it gets accepted, or you discuss it. and then it gets closed or merged. That's generally how modern development sort of works. As my chair breaks again. But anyways, the other issue with X11 is that because C is a wonderful language that's been around forever, it uses an old dialect of C in some places.
Yes.
Like, I don't even think that they're using C99. They might be doing C89, which is old. So if you're new to the C language, you're not learning modern C, or to work on Xorg. You're working on figuring out how people were writing C back in the day, figuring out what all those things do, and figuring out how you can make those things work. So you're reverse engineering Xorg to be able to work on Xorg. And that's why a lot of the Xorg team doesn't want to work on it, because it's old. And, some of them weren't there 30 years ago when this code was written, and some of it...
Most of them weren't.
Yeah, and a lot of it is Band-Aid fixes.
Yeah. And remember, as I said, it has some old features. It can use a printer as a display.
That's true. I have seen a lot of videos where people got a dot matrix printer working as their display output, and I think I personally think that's cool. But I also recognize that the paper for a dot matrix printer is more expensive than the printer itself for a reason.
It is cool from the perspective of interest. It's not cool from perspective of what you want today.
Yeah, that
as a user.
Yeah. So let's get talking about like this modern day fork of Xorg that's gotten a lot of community attention, whether it deserves it or not. So there was one guy that back in 2024, 2025, he made a lot of commits to X11, and he kind of was known as like the one guy keeping X11 alive, because this guy's running around. He does not like Wayland whatsoever, so he's going to do everything he can to keep X11 running. Which, hey, props to him, because if he wants to support it, he can support it. That's the nature of open source. That's perfectly fine. Well, he ran into a couple of issues with the X11 team, not necessarily with the X11 team not wanting to work on it, but rather his commits sometimes pushing buggy code or breaking other things in X11, and he's pushing everything to the master git branch, which is the stable branch of X11.
Yes.
Which I know a little bit surface level about the development, but I know that generally you make a fork branch when you're doing that kind of stuff.
Yes. So there are many strategies to how to develop with Git, or how to use Git to help develop and to version your code. So there are strategies where master or main branch is used basically as a dumping ground for code, but that is a very ugly way of doing it, in my opinion. Now there are other ways of doing it where main represents some sort of stable continuum, which then involves tags and branches for set in stone versions, and you're supposed to work inside a fork or a branch on your own code, and once it's tested, it gets included into main. That is actually one of the most popular workflows today, and it is what was apparently at least now used by Xorg team.
Yeah. So, the people started pulling in like the code of conduct committee on this guy, saying that hey, there's proper ways to do this, and you're not doing them over the proper way. So he started getting in contact with them, and then it turns out that he kind of went on a bit of an anti-Red Hat triage, and that kind of got him extra flags. Because, it turns out that there's a lot of Red Hat employees working on Xorg, because, Red Hat kind of has kind of has
A vested interest.
has an invested interest in fixing some more of the critical Xorg security issues, because Red Hat has these things called government contracts where they're kind of required to come in and fix this stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
So obviously you're going to get a lot of Red Hat employees working in that area. So
Yeah.
Anyways, they kind of went further, and then it eventually imploded, and he got himself kicked off of the freedesktop.org
Yes.
GitLab page. So this is when he decides that he's just going to make the fork. And that is the birth of Xlibre.
So at this point, I have to put a disclaimer. Any project or group has the right to remove any project off of their hosted platform if they want to, which here we're talking about free desktop. If they do not want to host it. Same goes for users of their service. If they do not want that user to be there, they have the right to remove them.
Yes.
So even if the project and the person are actually forking their one of their project, doesn't mean they have to have you host the fork on their service. You can host your fork wherever else you want. They have the right to say no, you're not gonna be hosting it here.
Yes. So this is when I found the project, and the very first thing I did,
most of us found it
at
that point, I believe.
Well, yeah, because it got caught. It got picked up by the journalist, of course, because that's just what they do. But the first thing I did when I looked at this GitHub repo is I did the responsible thing. I scrolled down and read the README, and it is a very politically charged README. I'm giving you this warning right now.
Politics.
I'm giving you this warning right now. If he went through and didn't put the 3 middle sentences in the very first section of the README there, and instead he just had Xlibre is a fork of the Xorg server with lots of code cleanups and enhanced functionality. It doesn't matter which country you're coming from, whether your political views or your race, your sex, your age, or your food menu, whether you wear boots or heels, whether you're a furry or a fairy, Conan or McMay, comic character, a small furry from Alpha Centauri, or just an average boring person. Anybody who's interested in bringing X forward is welcome. If that was the entire README, I wouldn't want to hit this project as hard as I am. But he mentions that the fork was necessary since toxic elements within Xorg or moles from big tech are boycotting any substantial work on Xorg in order to destroy the project and eliminate the competition from their products, the classic embrace, extend, extinguish tactics. Well, I went through the archives of the Free Desktop GitLab and I looked at some of his stuff. They weren't boycotting his code. Instead, they were just saying, hey, this patch doesn't work. This patch breaks this component. This patch breaks this. This patch breaks this. Is this thing even necessary? That doesn't sound like they're boycotting him.
That sounds more like they are trying to get him to test code and have his contributions help the project.
Right? I mean, this guy was pushing...
You cannot include untested code into what is a stable project.
Right? And a lot of his commits, he touched a lot of components of X11, just working on things. And I looked at some of his commits, and a lot of it was just him moving lines around or adding white space. And I don't know if that actually does anything. I mean, I'm not a C developer, so I don't really know exactly what the functionality is, but I know sometimes in C code there's just random line break that's just there because if that line break's not there, things break and nobody knows why. Yeah. I've seen that before.
Yeah.
So, it kind of gets me wondering, what does the future of Xlibre look like, Bigpod? I know that we've gone around like looking at this a little bit here, and I've seen that there's already a couple distros that have picked it up, but but distros that have picked it up aren't really any of the bigger distros.
Yeah.
And I know that there's an AUR package for it, and then I know that there's a Gen 2 overlay package for it. Those are like the two big distros that would know about it, and then.
Yeah, but neither of them are in the official repositories. They are in community run repositories or third party repositories.
If you're curious, the protest distros of Devuan and Artix, where their one and only selling point is they don't ship System D, they have picked up Xlibre. And I know Devuan has already packaged it. And Artix is looking into it.
So now they're gonna have a second point of view,
yes.
Second reason to exist.
However, those two distros are still shipping the Linux kernel. Which, if your only reason for hating on System D is big tech, and your only reason for shipping Xlibre is big tech, I've got some news for you. Because I don't know if you looked, but who pays the Linux Foundation?
I don't know if you looked who puts most lines of code into the kernel.
Oh yeah, that too. I know every now and then we get a kernel release where Linus breaks down like all the different contributors and like how many commits were made, but it doesn't really give you percentages. But the number one contributor is often Microsoft.
Yes.
Of all the companies in the world, it is Microsoft. Number two is usually somebody else. The only company that I even remotely trust in that entire list is Red Hat.
Yeah.
Like,
well,
actually.
there is Intel somewhere there, normally in the top 5, which I somewhat am okay with trusting Intel because, well, they make the CPU I use.
Well, they make the CPU and the hardware that I use too, and they're getting into GPU space, which I know that Intel is not necessarily my friend, but I've been in communications with a lot of Intel developers, and they're mostly some pretty upstanding people. So,
And let's be honest, so are Microsoft people. I know a few who work on open source specifically for Microsoft. So those are great people too.
Yeah, that's true. All right. So let's hop off this topic, Bigpod, and let's have some fun. So we need to spice things up in our lives, because I know that you've been a wonderful enjoyer of these Fedora Atomic desktops that just plain work. Nothing's interesting in your life. And obviously, I tend to dance around a little bit as to what I have installed on my system, but I've been getting a little bit boring lately myself. So we need to do a challenge, Bigpod.
Okay.
Yeah, so Bigpod, obviously, in other worlds, I am known as a Gen 2 guy. In fact, I remember like at one point people were calling me Gen 2 man. Well, unfortunately, it turns out that there's a YouTuber called Gen 2 man. So, Bigpod, you need to install Gen 2.
Okay.
And I'm not talking about just installing it. You need to daily drive this for 2 months.
Yeah.
Because, 1 month, not long enough. Let's do 2 months. Let's make a deal out of it.
Let's do this. And you will install Slackware.
But I've already installed Slackware before.
Well, you're gonna do it again. I also installed Gentoo before in a VM.
Yeah.
I just never daily driven it for an extended period of time.
Yeah. I feel like you gave me the harder distro. 'Cause at least Portage does dependency resolution.
Yeah. Well, the choices were, because I didn't have idea what to give him. I first came to an idea of, because I am sometimes mislabeled as the guy who supports Microsoft. So I was going to give him what used to be known as CBL Mariner, which is now known as Azure Linux, which isn't even a desktop distribution to begin
Oh, boy.
with. But then I noticed Slackware, so I went with that challenge.
Well, I'm glad you gave me the more reasonable option because I have used Slackware, and
We're gonna see how reasonable it
yeah,
is.
we will find out just how reasonable it is in the next episode because my last experience with Slackware did not go so well.
And here are the rules.
Okay.
So by the next episode, we have to be running the distro. So me, Gentoo, use Slackware,
Yeah.
and we have to record an episode with it, and we have to do a check-in, and not just a I am running this.
Oh, okay.
But we're gonna be using I don't know, NeoFetch, FastFetch, and show it on screen. So sorry audio viewers, but I might just engage some of my programming skills and make a tiny media sharing system, so you can get a link inside your show notes to see the screenshots, which will be taken during the episode on screen. And for video viewers, there won't be screenshots. They will be proper screen shares. That's why we need that's why we want to do it. You need to do it on system. An additional challenge: absolutely no universal packaging formats of any kind.
Okay, so
So
no Flatpak,
native packages.
no running things in Docker containers, no running things in
No
in a virtual
Flatpaks.
machine, not even app images. Okay, we are doing this the hard way. All right, so obviously, I'm in for a doozy because
And
reasons.
I am in for a lot of compiling.
Yes, well, the benefit of Gentoo is that it's really just a test of patience. Because when you're fixing Gentoo, you generally have to just sit there and wait. And a lot of times, the
Yes.
package manager tells you how to fix it.
So, shall we start?
I guess we will start. In fact, I already have the Slackware ISO for 15.0 downloaded. And
I have a Gentoo live CD already downloaded as well.
okay. So, we're audience. You need to send us emails. Give us predictions on how exactly our lives are going to work out. And if you got tips for Slackware, you should definitely send them my way because, heaven forbid, it's been a couple years since I messed with Slackware. I know that there's a couple third-party repositories like Slack Builds and Alien Bob and so on. So I'm interested if anybody's got some fun tutorials on that. Bigpod, you have like 700 episodes of Distro hacking. Go back and watch. So
I know.
Yeah. And also, I guess you can just ping me in the Discord and go like, hey, Josh, I'm having this issue. Can you help me fix it? I'm like, yeah.
Yeah, that's gonna be fun. The first issue I'm gonna right away ask you:
Yeah.
Does the ISO support secure boot and UEFI boot?
Yes, but there's an asterisk. You have to sign the kernel
Okay.
yourself.
Oh God. I guess I'm gonna have to be playing with my BIOS or UEFI.
Or
The device this is going on is UEFI only, so no compatibility for BIOS. So that's my first. It needs to work.
well, you see,
And by
UEFI.
standard, it is set for enforcing mode for secure boot. So I guess I'm gonna have to be either disabling that or at least give it into warning mode only.
Yeah, I've never messed around with secure boot on Gentoo myself, but then again, that's because I only ever put Gentoo on my desktop, so I didn't really feel the need to worry.
Well, my laptop is kinda an enterprise grade, so it has all the proper security.
All right, so I hope that you have some fun with that adventure. Just remember the handbook is your friend. And the best support comes from a guy named Sam in the IRC channels. Like, actually. He will hold your hand. In the meantime, Slackware, probably going to be the same case if I ever need to worry about secure boot. Obviously, I can't just do Slackware because, you know, I'm using this thing called an Intel Arc GPU, and Slackware uses the 5.15 kernel, which means that I need to pull in a newer kernel. So I have two choices. I can either do this the easy way and just upgrade to Slackware current, or do this the hard way and just compile my own kernel. We will find out where I land in the next episode. But of course, you guys might need to support us in this adventure because, you know, if you go to patreon.com/notextallowed, drop us a couple dollars in there, maybe you could tell us our next distro challenge to run. Because I'm sure somebody's going to tell me to run Arch Linux, and I'll have you know that if I wind up running Arch Linux for longer than a month, you're going to see a brand new repository from me called Arch Linux-fixed, where I fix all the packages.
Yeah, and at the end, we might just, if we have to do that, we might just have a package repository from. You might get a package repository from TuxBase.
That's entirely possible. So, you know, just
more things for me to manage.
Yeah. Now, if you would like to see us potentially individually catalog our experiences so far, because you know, I've run into this thing called spare time lately, so I might be able to record an episode about, like, you know, our challenge progress, and, you know, just post it onto my YouTube channel. Yeah, that's right. We've got our own YouTube channels. They do exist.
Yeah.
Bigpod, I know you've been streaming some City Skyline.
Yes.
Yes, and obviously, you've got me tempted to drop $50 on the new version because I see a couple things out of that I kind of want to try out. And it's like, I don't know if I want to spend $50 on that, but then Steam started their summer sale, and now it's just like, I really want to try it. So, obviously, I got to get Steam installed in Slackware. Slackware is a 64-bit distro only, which means I need to figure out how to set up multi-lib support. Without Flatpaks,
You may have some fun.
I may have a lot of fun.
Well, the rule about Flatpak only applies to things we need for the podcast, so you can use Flatpak if the kernel supports namespaces, of course.
We'll find out.
You can use Steam to Flatpak to do Steam.
All right. Well, we'll see what I come up with, and we'll see you guys next week.
Goodbye.